Afternoon, everybody, and on this Memorial Day, welcome to ECTV Live with my co-host David DeCosmo. David, it's 92 degrees outside. We're here on Memorial Day, and we have a great guest today,
Absolutely.
David DeCosmo. I must state that as our guest today, we have one of my best friends in the whole world, David Wenzel, Vietnam veteran. David,
Tommy, how are you?
David DeCosmo and I planned this months ago. We're so happy to have David Wenzel as our guest on Memorial Day.
Well, I
Happy
knew we'd be
Memorial Day.
live on Memorial Day. Now, obviously, some people will be watching this on a tape delay throughout the week, but as we're doing the show live, it's Memorial Day.
Yes.
And we wanted to do something to honor those who have served our country. And, of course, one of the names that came to mind right away was former Mayor David
that's right.
Wenzel,
Yeah.
who sacrificed a lot for us, and we all thank you for that. This is a time to remember, and we're going to remember a little bit about your military career.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, as we begin, what your thoughts are on a day like this, because you went through the worst of things, as it were, and
Sure.
some of your buddies didn't come back.
That's true. You know, I was only over in Vietnam for 4 months altogether. While we didn't see that much action, we were losing people to these landmines, and that's how I got injured. You know. Okay. But the people I remember most when it comes to Memorial Day are the people that I was with at Valley Forge Army Hospital. And every one of them were amputees because we were all in the amputee wards. So today I think about a young fella down in Nanticoke right now. His name is Mike Stakowiak. He lost both of his legs even up further than mine, and also his arm farther up. And you know what? He came back and he got married and he built his own house, if you believe it or not. People with all that
Now,
problems.
this is a shot from the hospital. Would he be in that one, too?
No, he's not in here. He's not in this particular shot, but that is, we had a golf expert come to Valley Forge, and he was showing us how he could play golf if you only have one leg or one arm. Well, I shouldn't have even been there. I tried playing golf even with the artificial legs, but you know, you just don't get the power that you need in your legs to be able to play it.
How about the caliber of your treatment there, Dave?
It was top notch down there. Yes. First of all of the nurses who were in the amputee ward, they were all handpicked to be very supportive of the soldiers that were down there. It was a former barracks, first of all, and eventually Valley Forge closed down after the Vietnam War was over with. We went down for a reunion back in 2005. I took Joe Ricardo with me down for this, as a matter of fact. And we met the old nurses, and I remember one of the doctors gets up there, and just to show you the kind of guys we had in the ward and everything, he said, "I'm going to give you the definition of a hero." And a guy in the back said, "Yeah, it's a sandwich." We didn't want to be called heroes and everything. We served our time, and we just wanted to just be good buddies when we all came down.
You know what, David?
Yeah.
In my opinion, you are the real heroes. I know you suffered a lot over the years. You know what gets me about you, David? Now, we've been palling around for 30-some years. He has the greatest attitude.
Yes.
And we go to movies together, we pal around together, we have lunch together, we have breakfast together. And David, every time, I said one day that sometimes when I get depressed, I'd call David up or something like that, and I'm thinking, David's going through his own time. Who the heck am I to call you up and complain?
Well, I always enjoy the calls, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the reasons that I really wanted, and we get two for the price of one because Judge Munley is a Vietnam veteran
right.
as well. One of the reasons that I was particularly interested in having a Vietnam veteran on the program this day is because we recall that after World War II, and I had a cousin, Billy DeCosmo, who was injured about 2 days after D-Day, and thank God he's still with us.
Yes.
And we remember how the country rallied around this nation, after Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Right.
And it was a country truly that was one in terms of its feeling for the military, its support of the military.
Sure.
And that feeling was not the same for Korea.
Right.
And much worse, it was almost reversed when it came to Vietnam. That is, we've all heard the stories of Vietnam veterans coming back and being ridiculed and things. And so I wanted to ask, and I guess it's a valid question for both of you.
Sure.
Has that changed? Has that turned around?
Oh, has it ever really? You know, when we came back, and I remember for my wife coming down to the hospital, she came to visit me for the first time. There was no one there to do any kind of counseling for her, because the family are really the ones who suffer whenever anybody is wounded and all. And I always felt bad about this. Today, if you come back from Afghanistan or from Iraq and everything, if you have any kind of an injury, they have all kind of help for you that's available, which was not available for us at that time.
And I have a picture, actually, as you mentioned, your wife, and this was your wedding shot, which was on July 4th.
July 4th, 1970.
1970.
And when I came back to Fort Riley, Kansas, where I was stationed with my wife, just 5 days later, I got my orders to go to Vietnam. So that was my wedding present from the U.S. Army.
Right. And you know what, David, and David and I have been friends. David and I were in Vietnam at the same time. We didn't serve together. We were there at the same time. But I want to say that when I came back from Vietnam, and you asked this question, nobody really cared.
Yes.
Nobody cared one bit. I couldn't even get my job back that I had before I left for Vietnam. I couldn't even get the job back. Yep. And I was very mad, and I was very upset. And I was just in Old Forge, and David Wenzel, and I spoke in Old Forge about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, at the same place. There might have been 75 people there.
Sure.
I just went there with my friend Jim Bedford, who's a Vietnam veteran himself. There was 500 people there.
That's terrific.
I looked around and I said, I can't believe this crowd.
Now, what has changed? What has caused that change?
My opinion. Okay, go on, David.
My opinion is the attitude of the press about the media. Really, they are really pressing this whole idea about let's honor our troops when we come back and everything. Back in the 1960s, you had people out on the streets, denouncing anybody who was any military. They were kicking the ROTC out of all the colleges and things of that nature. So everybody kind of felt it was the cool thing to be against the war and at the same time be against the soldiers, which I still can't understand to this day. But today things have changed around.
And we can't assume that soldiers like war.
That's right. No, they don't like war.
Anybody who doesn't like war, it's the soldiers.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what, David? I think after 2001, after the World Trade Center, the World Trade Center went down, we lost 3,000 people. People started to realize how important our United States services, armed forces are. And I think that's what changed people's attitudes. Now, unfortunately, we have people dying in Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not going to get into that, but the bottom line is people should be remembered who served their country today. They should be remembered on this day. It's not everybody's, like I heard somebody say before, well, it's a holiday. It's not a holiday. It's a day to remember our veterans who lost their lives and the ones who are still alive who served their country.
I must say, and Judge Munley and I did some street reporting for the WYOU coverage of the Armed Forces Parade, which, by the way, has been rebroadcast here on ECTV a number of times, thanks to WYOU. And I've covered those for a number of years, as has Judge Munley, and we did see, somewhat weather-related, I'm sure, but beyond that, we did see a very good turnout this year, whereas some years in the past it's been kind of waning. Mayor, your military career, and you brought some interesting photos here. As a matter of fact,
yes.
When I first saw this one, I thought that you were pitching, but I guess that wasn't the case.
I'm going through my Tai Chi exercises on that one, I have to say. No,
so this was hand-to-hand combat training?
Fort Benning, Georgia. I went to what they call infantry officer basic training down at Fort Benning, Georgia. My great memory about Fort Benning is going to see the movie Patton down at Fort Benning. And it was with all of the enlisted men and all the officers in the beginning when George C. Scott gets up there and gives that speech about America doesn't go for losers. Oh, everybody was throwing things at the screen. It was great. If you're going to see a war movie, see it with a bunch of soldiers if you're ever going to go to a movie.
And you know, that's David and I start going to movie actually when the movie Platoon came out, and I know
Yes,
everybody
that's
heard
right.
of the movie
Yeah.
Platoon. David and I went to see that together, and we've been going to movies ever since. Now, since I've been a judge, I haven't had much time to go, and I have a little boy, but we used to go to movies on a regular basis for years.
That's right, that's right.
Have
Yeah.
you noticed too, and this may actually be related to the subject we just talked about in terms of a change in attitude, that we are beginning to see some motion pictures based on our latest conflicts.
Sure.
Now, after World War II, or during World War II and after, there were plenty of motion pictures that dealt with the war. You didn't really see too many with regard to Korea. They came out a little late. And you didn't see many about Desert Storm
No.
or that sort, but we're now starting to see those, maybe because of public's acceptance of what we went through.
Well, a good war movie is always going to be a good seller, but it all depends on the message that you're trying to get across. If it tends to be anti-military, the movie usually doesn't do that well. But if it takes a very even-handed, which is like what The Hurt Locker did this last time around, and there's a war movie that won the Academy Award,
Yes.
really, in a time when really, that Afghanistan is not really, on our high profile, as far as wars go
Yeah.
in American history.
Now, when you were in Vietnam, we have some shots there too, and
Sure.
some interesting stories concerning these shots, because this is obviously a non-action on your part,
No.
but there was some action on a young man's part. Do I understand here?
Well, that was on a patrol, and the kids would come around to you, and they would sell you Coke for 50 cents a
50
can.
cents.
Now, I think they bought it for 25 cents or even 20 cents a can. But that was nice and refreshing because you didn't have to carry the cans when you went up on any patrol. Then these kids were there to greet you as you go into onto the base, and that was great with these kids. I always wondered whatever happened to them and all the growing up in a communist country afterwards and all. Yeah.
I'll tell you, David, and 50 cents, we didn't get paid much when we were in Vietnam, as you know. A couple $100 a month, I think, was our salary.
Something like that. Yeah.
But we putting up 50 cents for a Coke, and most of the time the Coca-Cola wasn't cold.
That's
It
right.
was warm, but it still tasted like $1 million. Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
You eventually got into political life here when you came back, and of course
Sure.
became mayor.
That's right.
And yet you have a photo here prior to your injuries that suggests you.
Oh no, that was afterwards.
This
Yeah.
was afterwards?
Yeah, this was afterwards
Okay.
when I was the mayor in 1988.
This was 1988.
That's right. And this is when there was a controversy over about the demolition of the state office buildings, State General Hospital building, and the erection of the Murley Center right now. And I came out in favor of the Murley Center. And so that's when Bob Mello sent me this picture that we had down there. I went down and I met with the governor, Governor Casey there, and Senator Mello and Senator Musto. And this is where he's signing the final papers, going ahead with the Murley Center project and all.
Now that has become a major boon to veterans
Yes, certainly has.
from our area.
That's right. Yeah.
The veterans love the Murley Center. It really is a great thing. But you know what's amazing about David? And now David and I, we go over to the Veterans Center every chance we get. We go over there. But when you were mayor of Scranton, see, a lot of the people felt pride. The vets especially, because the vets loved David. So there was 20,000 vets in Lackawanna County when he ran. In Scranton alone, there was over 10,000 vets. He got most of their votes because that's the truth.
I think we did.
Yeah, because the vets. He's one of he's actually one of them, and you feel that when you run for office, David.
That's
Sure,
right.
sure.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you think that those who are, we of course have gone to an all-volunteer service,
Sure.
and there's still controversy today as to whether or not we ought to have a draft situation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? I have a feeling that we should have some type of national service where everybody who graduates from high school has to put in something like maybe about, anywhere from 8 to 12 months of national service, whether it's in the military or whether it's in some kind of a inner city, working in hospitals, veterans hospitals, or
Public
any
service
kind of,
type of
yeah, any kind of jobs. They're out there, they're available. The idea being to give them a sense that this is their country, that that they are going to be contributing something to it, and that they should then be honored just as veterans are. Not everybody in the country is capable of being a soldier. Really, we wouldn't even want them to be soldiers and everything because of all kind of conditions they might have. But I think that everyone should have an opportunity to be able to serve their country in some kind of capacity.
And here's my take on it, David. We don't have a draft today. If we did have a draft today, I honestly think the people would not accept a lot of things that are going on in our foreign countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, because that's what happened in Vietnam. We had a draft. Mm-hmm. All of us were, a lot of us were drafted, and the people were up in arms over it. Now it's an all-volunteer army, so you don't see the people protesting in the streets over Iraq and Afghanistan. Why? Because they're volunteers who go there voluntarily. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference.
Another thing that's changed is the evolution of women in the service. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about what you've seen happen there and what may happen yet.
Okay, one of the sights that I thought I'd never see in my lifetime, and it was down at the VA hospital just about maybe about a year ago. I'm getting out of the car, ready to go into the hospital and everything, and here I see this young girl, and she was on a pair of crutches, and her leg was missing. Now, when I go down there, I see very few amputees, to tell you the truth. Well, most of the guys would be wearing their prosthesis or anything. But to see a young lady, without, that blew my mind when I was down there. Women have a place to play in our national defense, and I think they're doing a terrific job, really, the way they've been able to integrate and do some of the things. When you consider World War II, all those people who delivered all of our planes from on one side of the Atlantic over to Europe, they were all women flying those planes.
That's amazing when you think about it. The Vietnam experience, David, to me, as David and I talk about this, we've talked about it for years. I never agreed with it, but I'm not going to get into the political end of it right now. But I want to ask you, David, what I think is amazing about him. Here he comes back from Vietnam, an amputee. He gets involved in public service, runs for mayor, and is elected mayor of Scranton. And then to top it all off, I mean, I've always said that he should be head of the Veterans Administration of the United States, which is a cabinet position. David had an opportunity. He was on a national commission. What president put you on that commission,
That
David?
was George W. Bush.
George W. Bush put him on the national commission.
Yep.
I remember I called him up. I said, David, you probably could be the head of the Veterans Administration of the United States of America and be in the president's cabinet. But David said, no, I'm happy with what I have.
That's the funny part about that is the person who then took my place on that commission after I went off of it was a former head of the VA. So there you go. But
well,
Tommy, you know what? I wanted to come back to Scranton, and my wife, Janet, had a job as a school teacher here in the Scranton School District. I did have an opportunity to go down to Harrisburg. I was offered that by Governor Thornburg, but I turned it down because we both had our own careers going at the time. I was the tax collector and she was school district, and we wanted to stay in Scranton.
Now, part of his success he attributes to the fact that while in the service, he attained the position of jungle
I'm a jungle expert. That's right.
What is a jungle expert?
Well, I went down to Panama, where they have a jungle expert school down there. It lasts only 2 weeks, and is run by the special forces down there. And we learned how to navigate through the jungle, how to find things which you could eat from off the jungle floor that were still available. And my one great memory is that we had to swim across the river had to take all of our, go right down to our buff, you know, and put all of our clothes into around our poncho and use that as a flotation device to swim across the river that they had down there. And they told us afterwards, they said, we only lost about 4 people who drowned on the river
Wow.
over a period of 3
Wow.
years or so. But I'm glad they told us afterwards.
frightening.
On that one. Well,
That's
that was interesting. It was very interesting.
You told me another interesting story. I'm going to go back to this photo in the lower.
Yes.
The lower photo of
Yes.
these shows you with one of the South Vietnamese. Was an officer or
He was a captain in the South Vietnamese Army.
And we noticed, obviously, before your injuries, you stood what, 6?
I was 6'2".
And
That's
you
right.
said that the average
The
South,
Vietnamese,
right?
the Vietnamese was only maybe about 5'5" or 5'6", somewhere around that range and everything. And anyway, we were on a joint patrol, and on this joint patrol, the captain and I were toward the head of the column, and then you'd have a Vietnamese and an American, a Vietnamese American, so it was intermingled, you know, as far as going along. We're going down this path, and we're going by this little pond, and suddenly the gunfire opens up, and everybody hits the ground first of all, and just start looking around. What the heck is it? And here it's some of these Vietnamese. They saw a couple of ducks on the pond, and this was going to be their evening meal. And you can't blame them. You know, they're in for the long haul, and they have to go back to their families at the end of the day and all that. And they saw an opportunity and they took it. You know, it's the fact that it scared the hell out of the rest of us was beside the point and all. Yeah.
You know, I could say this on Memorial Day, and David will appreciate this. In Vietnam, when you're like, for every, like when I was over there was 400,000 soldiers. But what I want to impress upon everybody who's watching, 90% of them were not in the infantry. They never even carried a weapon because they're support groups. The 10% of myself and David Wenzel happened to be in the infantry who were stuck in the jungle. We're the ones who suffered most of the injuries because, I mean, I know a lot of people who went over there, they suffered, but I mean, when you're away, you're away.
Yes.
But being in the infantry makes it hard because you're worried about artillery rounds, you're worried about mortar rounds, you're worried about booby traps, you're worried about snipers, you're worried about, and there's no rest from that. It's 24 hours a day. You're not fighting 24 hours a day, but you're worried about it 24 hours a day. That's why a lot of people, David, as you know, can't take that pressure.
Right.
Well, and another aspect, and again, we get back to why I think we wanted to have Vietnam veterans represented today is when you go back to World War II, when you go back to Korea, the enemy had uniforms.
Sure.
When you got to Vietnam, although there were some uniforms involved, by and large you also had an enemy that was not uniformed.
That's right.
So that there were plenty of civilians that were in the same realm, the same areas where you may have been.
Yes.
May or may not have been civilians in reality.
Yes.
And that is certainly a major thing that's changed. Boy, you look back at history and you think of the days of colonial America when you had the redcoats marching in a straight line to take a position. And now you've gone full circle from that to where you have, you don't necessarily recognize the enemy.
That's right. You know, there was, when the day that I was injured, there was a village that was not more than about 500 yards away. And I had been in that village before, and the people had always been, you know, they're very nice to see American soldiers and everything. But when I stepped on that mine, and they knew that somebody got hurt, there was cheering coming from that village, that same village. And I could hear them from where I was.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, the suffering that goes on. I have a hard time with it, David. I'm not going to profess, or I'm not going to explain now what my views are on war, but I have a hard time with America, some of the things that happen with the wars we're involved in, but that's for another day. But you, David Wenzel, that's why I'm so proud of what he did. I mean, it had to be hard even running for mayor, David, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember then you used to wear prosthesis.
That's right. Yeah.
And he used to have, David used to carry himself around with
There was a cane with a hook on my hand.
Yeah,
you know,
honest to
grab it
God,
and
David, it
everything.
was
That's right.
incredible to watch him.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? That was the rehabbing that I had down at Valley Forge Army Hospital. A lot of us were able to go around with a prosthesis. When I went back for this reunion that we had, almost all of us were back in a wheelchair. So it was just a matter of time when it would happen. I'd still be walking around, but in that 2005, I fell and I broke my elbow, and I can't straighten this arm out. And that's you just go into the wheelchair, and that's it. It actually cut down on my mobility of being able to get around by almost about 60 to 70%.
Maybe so, but better the wheelchair than a rocking chair.
Exactly, that's right. You just make do with what you've got and you carry on. That's what you do.
Exactly.
That's right.
We know that on this day, and of course, again, some are watching on tape delay for other evenings, and maybe that's good too, because in a sense, being live today and repeating, we sort of carry this day and give it an extra week.
That's
we
right.
expand Memorial Day through the reuse of this program. Yeah. A lot of people are attending services at various cemeteries usually, but around other monuments and things. And I guess we've really kept up with those. There have been some major changes up at Naog Park now.
Yes.
Some new monuments that have been put in to honor those that have served, and you've seen those,
Yes.
Dave. What do you think of them?
Oh, I think it was tremendous, really. The slabs of steel which they have there honoring the dead from the different our most recent wars, that's terrific. I always remembered going up there and seeing that shell that they had from the battleship Maine.
Yes.
That they had out in front of the museum and everything. And I never, as a kid, I never really realized the importance until I started reading up about all this stuff. It's a great way of getting kids interested in history. When they see these things, they're going to go back and want to read about them. And so these people are never going to be forgotten, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to ask the question, you know, why are these monuments up here?
Now, there's a
And
great
they're gonna be
point. There's a
looking at
great
it.
point you've just made, and as we get toward the close of this Memorial Day program, something we ought to focus on, and I want to get your opinion, both of you. Do we have enough education, historical education, with regard to, for instance, World War II and Korea? Because the kids in school today, Vietnam to them is ancient history.
It's like
right,
World War
that's
II was to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything we know about World War II, I think you'll agree with this, what we saw from the movies.
Right.
Okay. I think that's what the future generations, what they're going to get out of Vietnam is what they've seen in the movies, and what they get from Afghanistan is going to be things like the Hurt Locker and things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
But
sure.
we've got to teach it in the schools. We've got
But they should teach in
That's
the school to
right.
give you the background as far as, you know, why we got involved in these different...
And David was teaching a course on Vietnam at the University of Scranton.
That was very popular
Very
course
popular
with the
course.
students.
And of course,
over
we're
there.
losing the World War II veterans at an astonishing rate now,
That's right,
and
yeah.
this is all going to start to carry on. I remember when I first got into news, I remember seeing a World War I veteran who had served with
Yes.
President Truman when Truman was in the military. But we tend to remember or think of the conflicts we face now, but we've got to remember the past, because if we don't remember the past, again, you're doomed to repeat it.
Well, I couldn't say, leave the program without saying something about my father-in-law, who died just a couple of years after I came back from Vietnam. But he was a World War II veteran, went away for 3 whole years. Pantel, it was Carl Pantel, and also his brother. They were there, and also another Vietnam veteran, Jim Geyser. I was up at the YMCA, and there is a memorial up there for him. The gymnasium is named after Lieutenant James Geyser, who was killed over in Vietnam. He was in the artillery, a West Point graduate, and they built that gymnasium up there in his honor so many years ago that people forget all about it. I didn't forget about it. I have a flower up there for him as a memorial.
Good, David.
Yeah.
And anybody that has a chance to go by the Lackawanna County Courthouse, there are 2 people who gave their lives, who one was fortunate enough to come back and die a natural death here, but 2 Medal of Honor winners who are honored with monuments at our courthouse.
That's right.
Gino Murley and Sarnosky. His Sarnosky story is amazing.
Right.
And if anybody, we don't have time to get into it now, but here's talk about heroes. Wow.
That's
We're
right.
remembering a lot of them today in this Memorial
That's
Day,
right,
and rightfully
David.
so.
Rightfully
That's
so.
right. Yes,
And I just got the message. I've noticed we're almost out of time, but I do want to, again, David Wenzel, before I get to you, I want to thank Buddy Kenya for what you did in Old Forge. He's a Vietnam vet. every borough should look at this, because a lot of boroughs don't have parades anymore on Memorial Day. They should do it. Buddy Kane, you had 500 people there. Thanks for your service, buddy, and thanks for your service, Jim Befford, for being there with me. David DeCosmo, we had a great guest, David Wenzel. Thank you for your
It's
service,
always
David.
good. David,
You're
thank you
really,
very
you're
much.
really a great man. I love
No,
you,
it's-
and we're out of time. But I want to thank you for appearing with David and myself on ECTV for Memorial Day. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next Monday live.
Good to remember all.